Hey everyone, I am so excited to introduce you to my good friend and my coach, Peter Howe. Peter Howe has been such a bright light in my life and transformational in my journey. He's provided so much wisdom and so many insights that I'm excited for him to share those wisdom and insights with you today. So, Peter, for those of you who don't know Peter, share a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go ahead and get started with some questions that I would love to explore with you today.
Yeah. Oh, Dornell, it's so good to be with you today. I've been really looking forward to this. And yeah, I'm a coach and holistic counselor, and I've been doing that for a number of years now. And I also had a career in mental health before I started my private coaching practice. So 2017, I trained as a holistic counselor, and then I started working in the mental health space. And then I transitioned into coaching a couple of years later. And that's what really started to drive my passion to really help people. So I was able to just bring the skills that I was learning in the mental health space, working with, lots of people, and then felt the pull to start my own private practice. And I've been doing that for a few years now and have been working with people all over the world, including yourself. And it's been such an honor and a blessing. And yeah, there's nothing else I want to do. I really love this work and love being of service and helping humanity. And yeah, been looking forward to this interview. So let's get started with it.
Yeah, well, I'm so excited, as I mentioned, and yeah, just a little backstory. So Peter became my coach after we met through a mastermind that we were both in, and as I mentioned, it has been super transformational. And I've gotten to know Peter not just as a coach, but as a friend as well. And so he shared his story and journey with me a bit, which he'll be sharing through this interview, I'm sure. And he himself has experienced addiction, and I've had many people in my life personally that have experienced addiction as well. And so it's just such a pertinent topic, I think, to discuss. And so we'll just go ahead and jump into some questions that I had come up with, and some people that are close to me as well had wanted to ask you some questions. So I've intertwined those as well into the interview. And yeah, so the first question that I had for you, Peter, is I'm just curious, how would you define addiction?
Yeah, it's a beautiful question to start with. And yeah, having lived experience with addiction, obviously this is really close to my heart. And I think it's changed over the years, but I really see addiction now as just an habitual way that we find relief from psychological and emotional suffering. So we're all designed to move away from pain and move towards a sense of relief, and if we have any sort of suffering psychologically or emotionally and we're not able to face it, deal with it, sit with it, or be with it, then we're going to find some sense of relief somewhere else. We're designed that way. That's our wisdom and intelligence at play, is to really find a way for us to feel better. So addiction isn't a disease, it isn't a failure, it isn't an identity. It doesn't even mean we're doing something wrong. It just means we're finding a way to feel a sense of relief. And that's what I lived with for quite a few years.
hmm Yeah, so if you'd be willing to share a little bit, Peter, about what that experience was like for yourself personally, as far as, when that started for you, and a little bit about your journey with that.
Yeah, so it started, I would say, recreationally, when I reached adulthood, when I turned 18. For me, my real escape and relief was through playing sport, a lot of sport, um, which was my sense of finding relief, a way for me to feel kind of confident and comfortable in my own skin. Because outside of that, I just didn't. I really struggled with a lot of anxiety and depression since I was a child. And once my sporting career, was over, and like as an amateur, I there was just this void. I didn't know what to do. I was quite lost. So I had this high functioning chronic anxiety and depression. And, as an 18-year-old, you just start experimenting and trying new things. And for me, drugs was one of those things that was prevalent where I lived.
hmm
And once I was introduced to it, I my mind would just quieten down. Like I just I felt better. I was able to just escape from all the suffering that I was living with and the emotions that I just didn't know how to sit with. So it just became a way for me to find some sense of peace, internally and also peace of mind. And the thing with any addiction, when we find that relief, well, we're going to start using it over and over again. But when it comes to, addiction like drugs, well, then over time it has a detrimental effect, right, to your brain, to your body, to your immune system. So I got to the point in my mid-20s where I was fully hooked. I was a high functioning adult living with an addiction. And I just, it kind of just became a way of life for me because I was just numb to everything else. I didn't really want to face anything. I didn't know how to deal with my trauma or the suffering I was going through. So I was just desperately trying to find a sense of relief. And it then really started to take a hold. And when anyone who's lived with an addiction, especially a drug addiction, and there's prolonged use, well, then you start having side effects and impacts psychologically, as a byproduct of that. So I started to experience what you could say as psychosis symptoms. So a lot of paranoia, hallucinations, disorientations, and all of that from about 25 to 30 really started to get worse and worse. Uh, and it was about 30 years old where I was really at the lowest point in my life. I had lost my job. I failed a drug test and lost my job. So I had no money. I had, no structure in my life. No money in my bank account. There was, you know, perceptually nothing I felt like I had to really live for. Um, but I say to a lot of people, rock bottom is the perfect springboard for awakening and change. And, for me, I had to get to that point for me to then have an insight and to wake up that the way I was living it could be different. Because I used to joke inside of myself, and actually, so it wasn't really a joke. I used to genuinely believe this, that I would be dead at 30.
Mm.
I used to think like that. I had a lot of suicidal thoughts, obviously, with living with a lot of depression and anxiety and addiction. And the crazy thing that I'm reflecting on now about it is I did die at 30.
Yeah.
But I died to the old version of me that lived with the addiction because I started to wake up, and 2 weeks, I think 2 weeks or 4 weeks before I had lost my job, I had this random, spontaneous kind of awakening moment at work. Some people have experienced, these moments before, and it was just this ordinary day and something extraordinary happened to me. And the way I describe it best is like when you go and get your eyes tested, you're with the optometrist and you're looking through, that little device and to see, the letters and the numbers and which ones are clearer. Is it this one or is it this one? And I had that happen in an instant, but it happened from the inside out. I suddenly got a glimpse of a different world, of new possibilities. I started to ask myself different questions, empowering questions, possibility questions, questions about who am I at my core. And these are things that I'd never thought about before. I was just constantly numbing my experience, and constantly in this inner emotional turmoil. And that moment changed everything for me. And when you have those kinds of moments, what happens is, well, life has to start reflecting that new version of you. So old things had to start falling away, which is why then the job fell away and relationships fell away and my, structures, all of that started to fall away because I was preparing myself for something new, which wasn't an easy experience at all. But
Imagine.
I had a new foundation for change. And I'm so thankful for that moment. And it wasn't predicted or scripted, but it changed everything for me. And now, since that moment, all I've ever done since is learn more about the mind and about suffering and who we really are at our core and essence. And how do we find more freedom for our suffering and dedicating my life to helping people experience those same shifts within them.
Yeah, I love that. That's beautiful, Peter. And I love how you mentioned that you actually did have a death at the age of 30, but not a physical death, but just a death of that old identity, the old Peter, and now stepping into this bright light in your true essence that you are and impacting the world in such an amazing way. So grateful for that shift that you had. Now, was there something, a lot of times, people are looking for something external outside themselves of what steps do I need to take? Maybe someone listening or a loved one that they have is experiencing an addictive behavior and they're wanting to free themselves of this addictive behavior or their loved one to be free of it, and they're trying to decide, or is recovery the way we need to go, or what process do we need to go through to get this person to a certain place or themselves to a certain place? What would you say to that?
Mm. Well, it really depends on the person, and their life experience. So for me, I never went to any 12-step program, recovery center, or anything like that. Once I had my insight and, awakening moment, I just started to study and learn, about the mind, about human suffering and how to find freedom. And the biggest thing for me to help me let go of that addiction as well was I had an insight that all I was trying to do was feel better, because a lot of people that live with an addiction or addictive behaviors, we are constantly beating ourselves up. There's so much judgment and shame and guilt. And society doesn't really help that because there's a lot of stigma, there's a lot of judgment about addiction, especially drug addictions. So I just had this moment where I saw I was just doing my best from the level of awareness I had at the time to find a sense of relief and feel better. I was doing the best I could with what I knew at the time. I didn't see it that way. Yes, I had the moments of relief from using, but
Mm,
after that, it would just be guilt and shame and blame and judgment, and all of that suffering created the need to then find escape from it. But
mhm,
one of the most powerful things that helped me to let go of the addiction was the love and compassion I started to embody, because I saw myself as not broken or weak. I saw myself as this intelligent, wise being that was doing his best to find relief from his suffering. So when I saw that, I felt this cascade of peace and freedom and love just take over my body, from the inside out. And in that moment, I realized that I gave myself what I was looking for through drugs, that
mm,
my mind just started to quieten down. I felt myself in this beautiful space of presence and love. And I've been trying so desperately to find that outside of myself because I just didn't know any differently. I was dealing with a lot of emotional pain and suffering. I didn't know how to presence being with myself and my pain with love and compassion. And when I really saw that, I didn't have the accumulation of suffering, which then I needed to find escape for through drugs. I saw it happens from the inside out. Um, so that would be one thing I would say to people is find a way that works for you
mhm,
on your life, but also recognize that when you drop the judgment and the blame and the shame about what you're doing and you know, see it as your intelligence at play from your level of awareness at the time, well, then you can start to get a glimpse of love and compassion, which is what we're all looking for. We're all looking for love, compassion, and acceptance, right?
mhm,
That's why we want to find relief, because it's not coming from the inside of ourselves. And I would just add that as well. So take any measures that you feel make sense to you, but then also start to see that what you're doing is the best you can. And if you drop some of that judgment and start to feel that self-love and acceptance, well, then you're going to let go of a lot of suffering that you will no longer need to escape from.
mhm. Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think a lot of people are looking for that also, not only maybe from a substance, but from somebody else, right? A lot of times we're also
Yeah.
putting it on the outside of us. And so you've often mentioned this inside out understanding that you kind of became aware of. If you'd speak a little bit more to that. So Peter, since being my coach, he started writing newsletters, which he sends out, which are fabulous, which has so many great insights, and I've shared them with my friends and family. And so in your newsletters, you share a lot of wisdom around this inside out understanding, which we both have become accustomed to and been transformational. I know from my life, and I know from your sharing. So if you just kind of share how that's weaved into your journey as well, and how that applies, I guess, also to the realm of addiction and addictive behaviors.
Yeah, such a beautiful question. And yeah, it's kind of what I spoke about just before when I saw that the relief I was trying to find outside of me through drugs, I started accessing it from the inside out. So that also helped me gain this understanding of when I changed my perspective, when I changed my thinking about the addiction, about myself, I had a total shift in experience.
Mhm.
So I didn't need to change the behavior of addiction. I changed the way I thought about it. I changed my thinking about who I was, and that shifted the behavior naturally. It was a natural byproduct, but most of us are really looking at the external behavior. And if we can just change that, well, then we'll be okay. Or if it's, it's something external, a relationship, a source, an external thing. But the
Mhm.
inside out understanding is recognizing that we are the generators of our own experience, that we're not living in the feelings of our circumstances, or, yeah, we're not living in the feeling of our circumstances or situations. We're living in the feeling of our own thinking in any moment. We're creating our experience. Our consciousness is bringing that to life. And if we're not aware of that, well, then we're going to look to the world to find that relief, whether it's through a substance, whether it's through work, whether it's through working out, whether it's through a relationship. We're going to look to other people to help us find relief, or we're going to need to control our environment or our circumstances to find that peace of mind and freedom. It looks on the surface that's how it works, but it doesn't work that way. It's an illusion essentially. When we really start to see that what we're up against is the feeling of our own thinking in the moment, we're living in a thought-generated reality, not a reality of the external circumstances. Well, then we start, to me, looking in the most powerful direction for change, which is within. Because
Mhm.
if we're looking to the outside, there are so many things happening out there, so many things beyond our control. And if we're trying to control what we can't, well, that's the definition of anxiety, right? There's going to be a lot of resistance there because we can't predict what's going to happen. And if we want things to go a certain way outside of us to feel a sense of relief, this is why we need a drink at the end of the day. This is why we use substances or scroll on our phones because we're finding some relief from this source of suffering, which is coming from everywhere outside of us. But that's not where it's coming from. We're the source of it. And that's not bad news. I'm saying that as a way that it's good news because when we start to see that we are the generators of our own experience, well, now we have the power to change it. We have the power to really be curious about what's going on inside of us. What thoughts or thinking are we having? What feelings are we not being with inside of us? And if we start to really look at that, and to me, change is inevitable. We start to feel more peace and freedom and compassion and presence because we're no longer looking for the outside world to change first.
Right.
True empowerment is not needing anything to change for you to be free. And I feel lucky that I was able to experience an addiction to the level that I did because I saw how powerful the inside out experience was when I lived with the addiction, but then also when I started to see the change that I had in that moment from changing my perspective about myself.
Hmm.
Like if I started to try and look at my behaviors and changing that, that wouldn't have had the profound impact that it did when I saw, you know, myself differently. And that's why I love this inside out understanding so much. It's really, to me, looking in this beautiful direction for change and transformation, because to me, it can only come from one place. It can only come from within. It can only come from us seeing something differently, seeing something new, so we can have a new experience.
Yeah, thank you. I love how you articulate that. And I think that's so important because I feel like sometimes people, look to or just get rid of the substance. Like if I get rid of drinking or this drug, then I'll be okay. And then they maybe realize like that's one substance they stop, but then they still have the chatter going on in their heads that they don't know how to deal with. And so like, what can I turn to now? And so then they may, well, they don't think that, but that's what ends up happening is they may turn to another substance or a different behavior because they haven't really uncovered that understanding yet or had that insight. So thank you for sharing that and articulating that so beautifully.
Yeah, no, you're welcome. And yeah, you touch on a really good point, because if someone's not really aware where their experience is coming from, or they think it's coming from the outside world, it's not being generated from within them, then they could do everything to let go of that addictive behavior. But the way the mind works is it's going to find the next thing. And it's going to find the next thing. It's going to find the next thing, when even with someone dealing with a lot of anxiety, we tend to the mind will tend to pin it on all these different areas of life. So then everything looks like it's anxiety, driven. Um, so that's why it's important to understand that our experience is coming from the inside out, understanding more deeply how the mind works. And how, our feelings work and where they're really coming from. Because if we have a deeper understanding and grounding in that, well, then we don't have to act on any urge that we have. Because if the urge is just a thought and then a feeling and then a behavior, well, then I don't have to act on any thought or feeling that comes because I'm not any thought or any feeling. I'm the awareness of the thought or of the feeling. But for most people, thought, feeling, behavior is so conflated, so joined together that it's just constantly being reinforced. But if someone starts to understand that they're not any thought or feeling, and no thought or feeling can harm us. There's a space within that can't be touched, that's always whole, that's always complete and free and mentally well and healthy. The more we recognize we have that space within, well, then any thought or any feeling can be present, but we don't have to resist it anymore. We don't have to strategize or analyze our way out of it. We don't have to get rid of it because all of that just creates more resistance, more suffering, and then we need the behavior of escape. But once we recognize that we are the awareness of what's happening inside our minds, we are not the thought, we are not the feeling, well, then we can know we're no longer defined by them, and then the urge, we can have it, it doesn't feel comfortable, it's not great, it's not fun, not pleasant. But then we don't have to act on the urge, which means the behavior doesn't get reinforced. And then over time, that addictive behavior naturally starts to shift because we're not focusing on trying to fix ourselves or change the behavior. We're just seeing and understanding more and more about how the mind works and how thought and feelings work. And they're not who we are. We are something much more powerful, much more free, much more whole and complete than that. And for me, that really helped me to understand that because when I let go of my addiction, it's not like all my cravings went as well. Like I had a lot of anxiety, a lot of emotion, a lot of stress, and a lot of urges to use again. But once I had that glimpse, I started to see, wow, like I can be with this now and not have to act on it. And that is so empowering for anyone to recognize. Doesn't matter with whether they have an addiction or not, is to see that we don't have to act on any feeling that we have. We don't have to act on any urge that we have or any voice in our head that tells us we need to do this thing to find a sense of relief. And the more we can see that, we start accessing this natural capacity for relief, for peace, for presence that can hold any uncomfortable experience and trust that it's going to move through because it always does.
Yes.
Right? We're trying to use the substance or whatever it is to find relief from that feeling, from the suffering. But once we recognize we can presence it, we start to see that it moves through naturally on its own because we are designed that way when we get out of the way, when we stop thinking about it so much, when we stop resisting it so much, when we stop trying to fix or change or control it. It's simple. We can be with it. We can witness it. We can feel it. It's not harmful. It's not going to hurt us. We just had some conditioned habitual thinking that made it look like it was so big and scary. But when we kind of see it more as just this energy moving through our bodies and our minds, well, then it becomes something that we don't need to fear or worry about coming, because a lot of people are worried about being anxious before the anxiety is there because they're scared of it being there, or it's wrong, or I shouldn't be feeling this way. It shouldn't be happening. But when we see it more like, to me, like weather or clouds in the sky doesn't really worry about what clouds come and go. It's the space that holds any weather pattern, any sort of cloud, whether it's a nice fluffy white one or it's a really dark one that's got some thunder and lightning in it. It's still the space that can hold the pattern to come and go. We, to me, are more like the sky than we are the clouds. And if we can really start to separate that, well, then to me, we start accessing who we really are, which is this vast, open space of freedom and peace.
Yeah, I love that. Wow, so powerful, Peter. There's so much in that that I could share. But some of the things
Yeah.
that came to mind as you were sharing was, I know just from my own personal experience in 2020, I took a program that was kind of my first transformational breakthrough. And at that time, I so over-identified with my thoughts. I mean, I didn't even, they took us through an exercise where they had us close our eyes and see if we could kind of hear the voices in our heads. And
Mm.
I didn't even know that was such a thing. Like I was like, huh? And that's when like this light hit me like, oh, there's actually a voice in my head talking, I have this chatter. And I had just been so identified with it. I didn't even know that was a thing. And I think that a lot of people don't realize that and do become so over-identified with it. So you shared so nicely there, kind of that we're not our thoughts, we're not our feelings, but we're the awareness of them, which is so powerful. And I know, Peter, in your coaching with me, you helped me through a challenging time with recently having my son and unexpected circumstances that arose after he was born and having to have surgery and being in the NICU for the first 2 months of his life and all the various thoughts I had around that. And I just remember experiencing thoughts that I was scared to think. And I don't know if you remember that conversation that we had
Yeah, I do.
when we went through coaching, but that was so powerful. When you gave that example of the clouds in the sky, and just also, I think you mentioned something about if you put your hand on a hot stove, you realize real quickly you're going to want to take your hand off that hot stove. And similarly with our thoughts, like we don't have to keep on engaging in some of these thought patterns that have us kind of with our hand stuck on the stove. We can remove that hand when we realize that those thoughts are there. So that's just some of the things that have been so transformational for me. So I appreciate you sharing that, and hopefully it will also be, transformational insights for others as well. Um, so as far as, I mean, it sounds like in our conversation, we've touched on a lot of the questions that I wanted to ask you. Um, I know some people sometimes mention or they have this thought that addiction is passed down through generations, or maybe it's something genetic. I know you kind of touched on a little bit before, but what would you have to say around that?
Yeah, I don't see it as being passed down from generation to generation. I just see it as a response, an internal response to what's happening in our environments when we're younger.
Hmm.
I feel like if we think it's, passed down from generation to generation, or it's some kind of disease, um, it can feel like it's a lot heavier to be able to let go of. I think it's just an habitual response to what we go through as children, right? Like we innocently start creating these thought patterns, these ways of thinking, these senses of self that we kind of create as a byproduct of what we're experiencing in our environments when we're younger. But you can also have children that grow up in a house with, an alcoholic, and one becomes an alcoholic and then one doesn't.
Hmm.
So like those things are at play as well. Um, but I think it's important to see that if it's just being generated from inside of us innocently, then to me, I think that creates just more of an empowering way to be able to let any sort of addictive behavior go. Because if it's something that's being passed down to me, just to me, this feels like it can be more challenging to be able to let it go. But if it's something that's just an habitual way of thinking, it's just it being this, this way that we've created inside of ourselves to help us get through some really challenging times and experiences. Well, then we can look at it as something that helped us and we can thank it for being there and for helping us getting through. But now we can see it differently. We can have an opportunity to be able to let it go. I looked at my, sense of self I created and these habitual ways of thinking as like an old friend, like
Hmm.
a friend that really helped me and carried me through some traumatic experiences that I'd gone through. But once I started to kind of wake up to all of that, I wasn't thinking that I needed to let go of what was passed down to me. I started to like be thankful for my mind helping me survive and get through. And now I don't need you anymore. It's okay.
Hmm.
Like, I'm okay now. It's okay. I see this differently now. I see that I disconnected from the present moment or from myself as a way to get through what was happening around me. But I don't need to do that anymore. I'm safe now. I can come home to the present moment. I can come home to myself. I can start to process and be with all the emotions that I innocently avoided or numbed or distracted myself from because I didn't know how to deal with it when I was younger because it was too much for me. It was too much for a child. So I like to see it in that way
Hmm.
instead of something outside of me that got passed down to me. I always want to look in the direction of within with
Right.
more curiosity, with more love, with more compassion, and with more understanding. Because I feel like that starts to elevate my level of consciousness, which then creates a more powerful way for me to be able to create change because Einstein said you can't solve a problem from the same level of consciousness that created it. So if I'm embodying those states of being, to me, I'm naturally raising my level of consciousness. So then I'm able to dissolve the things that I had gone through and the unconscious ways that were created inside of me to help me get through some tough times.
Hmm. Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, and I think you brought up an interesting point as far as, two siblings being raised in a household maybe where there was a parent who was an alcoholic and one choosing a path to cope with addiction or addictive behaviors, and another maybe having addictive behaviors that weren't so apparent as far as maybe not drugs, alcohol, something of that sort. But just going about it in different ways. And I think that, points so beautifully to what you're describing and the inside out understanding. And so I'd love to talk a little and explore a little bit more around that as far as when people sometimes will point to like a traumatic experience. Maybe they have
Mm.
had trauma in their life, and not to discount that trauma by any means,
Yeah.
but just to explore and empower people maybe around that as well, that to look a little bit more within of how they interpreted that experience and how that may have, I guess, then the path that they took to cope
Mm.
with that versus it being really the traumatic experience that caused them to have an addiction, as some people may point to something traumatic. So
Mm.
what are your thoughts around that, Peter?
So yeah, what comes to mind, and I'll just speak from my personal experience, is the trauma I went through wasn't what happened to me.
Hmm.
Like I thought it was. But for me, what's hurt me more, the suffering that I've lived with more, wasn't what happened to me. It's what was created inside of me as a byproduct of that. What I believed to be true about myself or about others or about the world. It was the meaning that I innocently gave what happened that created all of my suffering. And that's not to dismiss, what we go through. But
Hmm.
if the trauma was what happened to us, then none of us would be able to heal because it would be stuck in the event.
Hmm.
And that event is over, right? But we can all heal and let go of our suffering and our trauma because we start to look at what have we made it mean inside of us? What sense of self have we created as a byproduct of that? What judgments do we now have about ourselves, others in the world? What internal patterns or lenses are we now looking at the world through based on what happened? And I feel like that's a really empowering way to look at it Because if it's in the event, we're going to be stuck in our history. We're going to be thinking about it, wanting it to be different. All of that, we're going to just be thinking more and more about it. And the more we think about something, the more we're going to suffer, the more our spirits get lowered, the more we get lost and confused and down. That's where a lot of depression and things like that come from. It's someone's been stuck in this habitual thought, habitual thinking for such a long period of time. But when I really started to wake up to all of this, I started to see, wow, like all the things that I thought that meant about me that I believed to be true, that hurt me so much more than anything else I went through.
Mm.
Which
Mm.
doesn't mean I condone the behaviors of others or the behaviors that I've done, but that to me, that's where the freedom is. The
Mhm.
freedom lies within us. It's not about changing our history, it's about changing our perspective of it. It's
Mhm.
changing our relationship to it. And those two words, perspective and relationship, can only happen in one place. It can only be experienced within. But if we're looking for the event to change or to be different, well, then today we're going to be looking for our life to be different, for someone else to be different, for the world to be different. And that's just not where our freedom is.
Right.
Does that make sense in regards to your question?
Yeah, 100%. Thank you for articulating that so nicely. Yeah, and it's amazing. I mean, I think for myself personally, and I'm sure many people can probably relate to this. You may go to therapists or spend many years in therapy trying to dig through your past and figure out, why did this happen and what meanings did I make of this and that and the other. And you can spend, go in circles with all of that and carry that with you, I feel like. And sometimes when you're kind of dredging through the past circumstances, that can feel exhausting from my own experience and not really freeing at all. And so, coming across this understanding, the inside out understanding, which also can be called the three principles,
Mm.
is been so powerful in my life. And so that's really what I hope people gain from this interview too, is just kind of a new way and a new understanding of addiction and just our thought patterns, that it's not something that we have to really dig into our past and uncover. I mean, it can be helpful at times, maybe to take little glimpses to see, but I think when we get stuck in it too much, as you mentioned, it just kind of can expand and it just can kind of perpetuate, even though that's not here happening in this present moment, but something of the past. So I think that's super
Yeah,
insightful.
I totally agree. And it can be like, you know, somebody gets bogged, right? Like they try and like spin their wheels faster and faster, but we sink more and more. That can be the same. We get stuck in our own thinking and that can kind of sink us more and more, but we're trying to figure everything out to try and find, the meaning or the belief and all of that. And that can actually bog us down. Um, and it really just depends on the person and the situation. But how I'm seeing it more and more in my life is if I understand that I'm just feeling my own thoughts in the moment and I don't have to take them so personally and seriously, and they can just move through on their own, well, then I'm going to start feeling so much more freedom, peace, and well-being
Mm.
without going into everything, without unpacking it all or figuring it all out and getting into the weeds of everything all the time. Sometimes it's more powerful to understand the nature of fear than to actually get in and find the specific fear. Because if someone understands how fear works, it's essentially just a thought we experience that we personalize and take so seriously, so then we're feeling all of that, and then that becomes our reality. But if someone needs to try and find that specific fear so then they're okay, well, then it's going to be what's the next fear to figure out? And then the next fear to figure out, and then the next one. Sometimes it's better when we take an overarching perspective and understand the nature of something and how it works. To me, we can be more free in that regard because we're really understanding the true nature of something. And this whole inside out understanding is about that. It's really about understanding that we are just living in this, inside out experience. It works like a projector. Our mind works like a projector. It's coming from the inside out onto the screen of life. But we have this misunderstanding that it's the screen that's creating our experience. Because when we're at a movie, we're watching the screen.
Mhm.
We kind of forget that it's coming from a projector behind us, inside the machine and out onto the screen. So we're trying to like change the screen. We're trying to change what's on the screen, the scenes on the screen. But once someone understands that it's coming from the projection inside their own mind, well, then they no longer need to look outside of themselves on the screen of life to change first. The light that's projecting inside of them. Well, that can shift in any moment when you really start to see that's where it's coming from. Any sort of fear, any sort of suffering, any sort of, emotional pain, that's the source of it. And when we start waking up to that, like you said before with the hot stove, we recognize, well, like we have this beautiful design that when I put my hand on a stove, I automatically take it away because it hurts. It creates suffering, right? We feel that pain. So once we recognize that when we're thinking a lot, we're thinking so much, we're thinking so much about our history, we're thinking so much about our future, we're thinking so much about our present circumstances with a lot of, hurt or resistance or fear. Once we see it's our thinking that's doing that, well, then we can naturally then start to take our hand off the thinking stove, right? And naturally start to relax back into how well we're made, which is our natural state of peace, of love, of presence, of resilience, and our capacity to then be able to be with anything, to deal with any challenges, to have challenging conversations, to perform better, to be more creative. All of that naturally just starts to unfold. We gain a deeper sense of trust. We feel supported by life. We're more connected to ourselves, others, and this greater universal intelligence that we're connected to and we're created from. When we slow down our thinking and see where that, seeing that our suffering is coming from all of that, we just wake up to what's always been here. It's like we have this light that we are, and we have all of these lampshades that are covering it, and we're trying to like figure out all the lampshades, right? But it's recognizing that you are this light. It never diminishes. It can't go anywhere. It doesn't leave. We just have this habitual thinking that's kind of just creating this reality that it's not there, or we need to do something about it. We need to change our circumstances. We need to fix ourselves, because we think there's something wrong with us. But none of that is true. We are this light that's always there, regardless of the thinking lampshades that are on top. And if the more someone really sees that to be true, and that's inside of them, and that light is made of mental well-being, it's made of pure presence and consciousness, it's made of freedom, it's made of connection, it's made of compassion, love, acceptance, and peace. Well, then if a thought or a feeling or a belief or anything like that comes up, well, we don't need to figure all that out. We just come back to the light and live more from that space and embody more of that space because we see it. And if we see it, we can live it. And if we can live it, well, then we can be it.
Yeah, wow. So powerful, Peter. Yeah, that's just been so, so helpful in my life, to have that understanding. And I think you hit a good point that from my personal experience, I know it's something that's come up for me is thinking there's something wrong, something I need to fix, something I need to change, something wrong with myself. And I feel as humans, whether we're experiencing, addiction to a substance or not, I think many of us struggle with this thought pattern that there's something wrong with us. There's something we need to do, something we need to change, something, wrong with being human, really. And so I think it's just so powerful to realize like all of us walk around with these thoughts in our head, and just how we deal with them and cope with them can look different. So just because one person turns to a substance, or one person turns to staying super busy, or one person turns to scrolling through social, media for hours and hours upon end, we're all really have that same equipment as human beings, that's running. And so just to really not, kind of help drop that stigma that you mentioned earlier in our conversation around, addiction, and things like that. I think that's just very helpful and powerful to realize it's really just a part of being human. Um, and another thing I wanted to share and hear your thoughts on it. I think too sometimes myself, I then a little bit in the beginning of this understanding, I thought had to like get rid of my thoughts. Like I needed to not have thoughts, like having thoughts still like, okay, and now I'm recognizing I have the thoughts, but I'm having so many thoughts, like, and thinking that was also like making that wrong because I was now aware of my thoughts, like because before I
Mhm.
was so identified with them that I wasn't aware of them. So now I have like this, I guess, kind of spotlight on my thoughts. And so now I'm like, oh my goodness, there's so many thoughts. And now I need to figure out how to get rid of these thoughts. So I think that's been, insightful as well to realize like, okay, you may still have, even with this understanding, a lot of chatter. You may have uncomfortable feelings still come up. And that's okay. You don't have to get rid of your thoughts, but just to know that they're there and going to come and go. But I think the more I was trying to get rid of them, the more resistance I had to them, the more they would perpetuate and kind of I would create my own anxiety around that of itself. So, what has your experience been with that, Peter?
Yeah, oh yeah, beautifully said. And it's one of the most common things that I talk with people about, is um because if we don't have this understanding and we're starting to see all of these thoughts, well, our mind is always going to try and want to fix something, right? It wants a strategy, it wants to figure it all out, it wants to get rid of it, right? And the difference with this understanding and why I love it so much is this isn't about any strategy or any technique. Part of being human is we're going to have thoughts and feelings. We don't really control the thoughts that come into our head. There's times where I go for a walk and just some random thoughts will just pop into my head. Like I'm not doing that, right? My mind is this space for this kind of to me, thought is just energy, right? And I have a space that allows these kinds of thoughts to come and go. But if I feel like I need to do something about them or control them, or a big one is intrusive thoughts, right? So even the language around it is important to recognize. Even the word intrusive is like, well, now I have an intruder in my head. So then if I have an intrusive thought, well, then I need to desperately figure it out, do something about it, try and find out a way for it not to happen or not to come back. And all of that actually creates more thoughts, more thinking, more suffering. And this understanding really points to we are the awareness of them. We don't need to do anything about them because they can't hurt us, they can't harm us, they can't touch us. It's just part of this human experience. And the more we recognize that, well, we can just kind of watch these thoughts come and go. And sometimes we'll get caught up in them and sometimes we won't. And that's okay too. That's part of our humanity. But there's nothing wrong with them. There's nothing wrong with you that you have them. There's nothing to figure out. They don't define you in any way. They're not wrong. It's not that they shouldn't be happening. It's just part of the experience. But we become so defined by them. We take them so seriously and personally, and then that's what creates all of our suffering. But if someone really sees that they're impersonal, they're not accurate, we don't need to take them so seriously, well, then they no longer define us, which then allows us to just allow them to come and go and live our lives. We can still have all those thoughts and feel at peace. We can still have all those thoughts and not feel like they're intruders that we need to figure out and get rid of. And for a person to start experiencing more of that, especially me, a lot of my stress and anxiety and worry naturally started to fade because I thought all those thoughts meant something about me. I thought they defined me. I thought there was something wrong with me with the thoughts I had. And especially when we're living with an addiction, those thoughts can be, in different realms in a lot of people, right? But once I started to see that they really don't have anything to do with me, they don't define me. I don't have to identify myself with them. I can be okay, totally okay and safe and at peace, regardless of any thought that's in my head. Well, then I stopped taking them so seriously and personally, which is what I did and a lot of people I work with do, because we don't really understand how it works. So when someone stops taking thoughts so seriously and personally, well, then there's a natural relief, there's a natural letting go, there's a natural relaxation because we're not tied up in what we're not. Right? That the knot we get caught up in is being tied up in what we're not. And we're not any of those thoughts, you know, and it's really freeing for someone to start being more grounded in that and really seeing that as a truth.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like a metaphor I heard before about kind of if you have a TV on in the background and say you're not really
Mm.
interested in watching the show, you may just kind of tune it out. It's still going to be there. You're still going to hear it kind of in the background, but it doesn't mean you have to engage with it. And similarly, as you've shared with me so insightfully that we don't have to engage with those thoughts and don't have to engage with that quote unquote TV show that may be playing in our heads. So that's been extremely powerful and very helpful. And I think, kind of circling back a little bit to when we were talking about this not being something necessarily that's passed down from generation to generation, I think that, it's kind of really just more of a innocently again a misunderstanding of what it means to be human and how our minds work, and maybe that it's just that awareness, not parents maybe not having that awareness and then not being able to pass that awareness down to their children. I think that's where it may come in, as people could view it maybe in that realm, not that it's actually the addiction itself being passed down, but just really this lack of awareness. And so I just wanted to throw in too a quote from Michael Neal, who both Peter and I are familiar with Michael Neal's work. And Michael Neal, for those of you who aren't familiar with him, he's the author of several books, and he himself is a coach as well. But he wrote one of the books that I love is The Inside Out Revolution. And I recently listened to a talk he did, and he said, "We are all in a recovery. We are in a recovery from a misunderstanding of how life works and where our well-being comes from and where our experiences come from." So I thought that was pretty cool quote, because it just really points to how whether you're experiencing an actual addiction with some type of substance or behavior, or not. We really are just all kind of in this recovery process, recovering from this misunderstanding. And so hopefully this conversation today will help shed light on that for some people and maybe be a aha moment. Or as I know you say sometimes, Peter, like a Homer Simpson.
Stop.
Yeah, exactly. I
Yeah.
was like, like when you say that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think yeah, that's just so much has been shared today. I'm so grateful for the time together, and I know I'm just want to be respectful of your time. Um, Before I end with my final question that I have for you, is there anything else that comes to mind, Peter, that you'd like to touch on?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that came up.
Yeah.
The first one was when you spoke about like we were speaking about thoughts before. Like our free will is we don't have to engage with them. We don't have to be defined by them. So if someone starts to wake up to that understanding that they have free will, that when any thought comes, it doesn't mean they have to hold on to it and think about it so much and engage with it and personalize it. And say with any feeling that comes, we don't have to take it so seriously and personally. We can just allow ourselves to be with it and feel it because we have this free will and this ability to be present with anything. Because as you just touched on before with the generational thing, it's just maybe a parent hasn't been able to be with their own emotion and presence that, so then they haven't been able to be with the child's,
Mhm.
and that's what can then create an addiction for someone because they haven't been um, really taught or they haven't really seen how someone can actually just presence and be with any experience in the moment, any feeling that arises in the moment. So if someone starts to really see that they have free will to be able to, not attach to any thought and not create any meaning with any feeling, but they're able to just be with it and hold that love and compassion, what we're doing is we're processing our past in the present.
Mhm.
We don't process our past, we process it in the present because that's the only thing that exists. So if we recognize that we have this beautiful free will And part of that free will is we have this endless well of well-being inside of us. That's the light that we are. If someone knows that they're mentally well and healthy underneath everything they're going through, that's their light. That can also help somebody let go of any sort of addictive behavior because it's like, the ocean. You can have all this crashing kind of waves happening on the surface, but you drop down just a little bit more, it's calm.
Mhm.
There's ease there. That's us. So underneath all you know, the chaos of our thoughts and feelings and, the busyness of life and all that stuff that's happening, we just drop down a little bit further underneath all of that within us, we can start to discover this well of well-being, this well of presence and peace, and we are mentally healthy already. That's our true nature. That's how we're made. We're made so beautifully in that way. If someone starts to touch that space within them, then whatever's happening externally on the surface of their life, they no longer need to escape from it or avoid or distract because they're coming back to what's true. So they don't need any sort of relief externally. They can just come back to themselves, come back within. And as Dick and Bettinger says, coming home.
Mhm.
We're all wanting to come home. We're all trying to find peace of mind and relief and freedom, and it's within us. So we just want to come home to ourselves. And you spoke about this whole recovery journey, which I love, and I love Michael Neill's work and his books, especially the Inside Out Revolution. That's a favorite of mine. I feel like we're also on an uncovering journey. We're uncovering the light that we are. We're uncovering the well-being that's already inside of us. We're uncovering the freedom that's there. We're uncovering the light that's just under some lampshades of thinking. So we want to also treat this journey like it's an uncovering process, not a technique building or a strategy building or an answer outside of us, looking for them. It's really an uncovering about what's always been there.
Yeah.
And to me, that's one of the most beautiful parts of this human journey is recognizing that we can come home, we can come within, and that's where all our wisdom is. That's where all the answers are. That's where our relief is. And if we just touch that space more and more and see that's where it is, and that's the direction we start looking in, everything gets better. Life gets simpler. We're more creative. We access more of our potential. Relationships get better. Life starts to mirror back, the inner reflection of the states that we're in. And um, I just love helping people uncover that as well.
Yeah, I love that you use the word uncovering. I think that's so powerful because a lot of times, from my experience, I think that again, pointing to like there's something I need to learn or
Mhm.
understand, and that's where sometimes I don't like to get caught up in concepts around this inside out understanding, because it's really not that. It's just we have to articulate it in some fashion, so we have to put words around it, like using the words of the three principles or things like that, but just really pointing back to our true essence, our true well-being, coming home, as you mentioned, as Dickens shares. So, yeah, it's so powerful. And yeah, well, any last things you want to share before I ask my final question? I know you had some great last insights there, so I want to make sure that I capture everything you want to share in this time together.
Well, one thing that I just want to share based on what we just talked about is slowing down.
Mhm.
Because if all of that is already within us, but if we are so busy, so externally driven, looking to achieve so we can be okay, looking for a relationship so we can be loved, looking for status so we can belong, if we're caught up in the busyness of our minds and of our lives, we're not able to see what's always there. We're not able to see what's already within us. And it really just takes the insight around slowing down enough to start to feel it, to start to get a glimpse of that light, to start to touch that space within, to start to come home and give up the search for learning, give up the search for seeking and finding outside of you, and just start to be in more of a space of silence and reflection beyond your intellectual mind and start connecting to a deeper mind, start connecting to a deeper space. And I get asked a lot of questions about, well, how do I do that? It's not really a how. It's you'll find your own way. Wisdom, your inner wisdom will guide you, but it's just about creating more of an environment and more of a space to slow down so you can start to listen to those whispers, listen to that guidance, and start touching that space in your own way and let that be enough. Let that speak to you. Let that connection start to be a priority and just start giving up that search, because many of us are desperately, at times we're looking for our glasses or we're looking for our keys and we're in this frantic kind of state searching and searching. And then we realize I'm wearing my glasses or I'm holding my keys in my hand
Yep, I
and we
think
feel a
I'll
sense of
relate to
relief.
that.
Yeah, yeah. We feel a sense of relief because we found what we're looking for. We already have it. So it's the same thing in life. If we recognize, wow, I already have it, well, then that relief of this constant search outside of ourselves can just start to fall away. And coming home is the best experience we can ever have as a human being. And it's going to be this constant kind of getting caught up, coming home, getting caught up, coming home. That's part of our humanity as well. And that's okay. It's just the more we realize we already have what we're looking for, well, then that search starts to dissolve on its own. And we start living from those beautiful states of being more and more. And that's what we're all looking for.
Yeah. Wow, so powerful, Peter. And what a great reminder just to, come home and just to who our true essence is and our true well-being. And I'm sure we could talk for hours and hours on this. I know you and I in our
Yeah.
own conversations, we have
Yeah.
hours upon hours of talks. So
Yeah.
maybe if Peter's so inclined and willing, I would love to have you back, Peter, for another
Oh,
time.
definitely.
We can
Yeah, for
dig
sure.
into some more and some other topics potentially. And this has just been so fabulous. I've enjoyed every moment of it. And so one final question I'll ask you, if this for some reason was your last talk that you could ever give, what message would you love to leave to the world, for this generation and future generations to come?
Such a powerful question. The first thing that came to mind is I love you and you are loved and there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing to fix. There's nothing wrong with where you are. There's nothing wrong with who you are. And you don't have to keep running. Like it's okay. You can stop now. You can stop running and come home because you matter. You deserve to be here. You are connected to something greater than you can fathom right now, and you belong. I think that's, I think in this moment, what I'm doing is I'm also speaking to my inner child when I say that.
Well, you brought
Um,
tears to my eyes hearing you say
yeah,
those words. Yeah. And I
I
just
want
wanted to
people.
take a moment to, let that sink in for myself and for everyone listening because, yeah, I mean, that's so powerful. And just, your whole point of slowing down. I mean, I think in our society, we're just go, go, go. And don't take that time to really slow down. And that's where we get stuck in this noise in our heads and externally outside of us. And just to really be able to kind of come back and come home and to the present moment, that's where true freedom and peace lies. So,
Yeah, and don't listen to the words. Listen to it beyond the words. I always encourage people, to look at it that way and not make it an intellectual practice, but really feel those words at a deeper level that there's nowhere to get to. It's okay.
mhm.
It's okay. There's nowhere to run to. There's nothing to escape from. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing for you to fix. And if you just start touching that and feeling that and seeing that, then that sense of belonging and that love and that connection and that freedom, you just start touching it and waking up to it. And that would be my final message for people is that it's inside of you and I love you and you are loved and everything is okay.
Beautiful, Peter. Such a wonderful time with you this evening for me. I know it's morning there for you in Australia. So I'm so grateful for technology that it can bring us together across the seas. And so, um, Peter, as I mentioned in the beginning, you are such a bright light, and I'm sure people will see that and are seeing that through this interview. And I'm so glad that your lampshades have not dimmed your light. You've let those go, and your light is shining through so brightly. And I'm so glad, even though I imagine it was a very challenging journey that you've been through to get to where you are today, I'm so grateful for where you have gotten and all the insights and wisdom you've shared with me and help transform my own life. And I know that it's going to be such a powerful message that others will also have transformation in theirs from this conversation. So thank you so much, Peter, for your time. And I love you, and I'm so grateful for you.
Oh, much love to you too. I love how our lights just have this beautiful synergy and how we've come together and to walk alongside you in your journey and to see everything that you're up to now and everything you've gone through to be here today and helping people in your own way. I love the light that you are, and I hope this conversation just touches many people. And just thanks for doing this, really.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Peter. And until next time, bye bye.